Okay. Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's episode. It's the first one for the day for me, so let's get going. The title is Have You Noticed There Are Worlds Behind Your Eyes? Like, seriously, have you noticed? So I thought of this situation that in the future, probably there's going to be like two friends, and one of them's going to look to the other friend and be like, hey, man, what are these worlds behind our eyes, And so that was the fascination for this episode, because there's the word phenomenon, and then there's the word noumenon. Now, noumenon refers to phenomena occurring that is not conditional to the sensory perception. A lot of our analysis of our environment, the way we're processing it, we are processing sensory information. The sensory information is instantaneously a being. That means the cool thing about reality, if you were someone with a wild imagination, it would be that reality is imagination you don't have to think about. It's imagination that is there before you need to do anything. So one view is that imagination is the deviation of reality, the dynamism, the changing, the speeding up of reality, its malleability. The other view is that reality is fixed imagination. It's imagination that you didn't imagine. I'm speaking about the inner realm and the nature of the mind of the human being. Of course, everybody has a different DNA, different way their eyes open to the world. So to have the same conclusion in a world where we're all different is not per se the final route. For me personally, I hadn't noticed there were worlds behind my eyes. That means since childhood, I've been having thoughts, different views, different moments, but I hadn't noticed I didn't have the discrimination between that which was real and that which was potentially real. Do you know? Let me see what's a better way I can say it. Pretty much in my youth, the objective realm defined everything. There was no space for anything else because there needed to be no space. That means the visible realm, the outer realm is just there with its own meaning. It's like you're on a roller coaster. You don't change the direction of the roller coaster. What I'm saying is when the experience of life is not 100% in control. What seems to be in control is what our attention can move. Right now, if your attention, let's say you're a pet owner and you don't have the leash. By the way, welcome guys in the chat section. Anything you want me to engage or talk about specifically or comment on, just put MW in the front of it and I'll just direct my attention there. For me, if we choose to see ourselves as local creatures, how can we see our intelligence separate from the location? How can we see our intelligence separate from the environment? Do you know? And if we feel like there's two ways you can say human beings are looking at the world, in a more deeper sense. In the sense that human beings are looking at an object projecting the subject. We feel the subject depends on how the object is. And then there's another notion where from this unknown subjective state or field, known particles are moving. So there's a way where your mind is the causal point where it's like starting, forcing. It's like the sun. Okay, here, perfect metaphor. It's like either feeling the mind is like the sun and the body is like the sunbeam, or the reverse, where we feel the material phenomenology of this world is leading towards the noumenology. So either the noumenon is causing the phenomenon, or the phenomenon is causing the noumenon. In the world we're in now, in 2020 right now, it's the phenomenon causing the noumenon. That's why it's created an opportunity for me to come and say, hey guys, what about the noumenon? So that's the thing, right? So now what do? Let's say you're a human being. Let's say even back in the day, not even now. Let's say back in the day, you suddenly realize, I don't know, the thing about noumenon is that you're a creature of attention. Your attention before the creature. In front of your eyes, you're a creature before your attention moves. And the reasoning for this is very complex. The best analysis I've had is that I've constantly thought about the chicken and the egg, and I'm like, which one came first? You know, people very boldly claim the egg had to come first. How did the chicken appear? And people are like, how did the egg arise when without the chicken? So there is this thing, and also in philosophy, where you're wondering if there is something more subtle, and if the subtle is intelligent or the gross is intelligent, if what on the surface is really the full show, or if there is more. What's on the surface is being puppeteered by perspectives that perhaps are not individual. I feel a human being is not just an individual, because the only way you get a sense of your individuality is by noticing what is collective and being able to identify with being separate. That means any person who's trying to be bad, you have to know what good is. Any person who's trying to be good, you have to know what bad is to not do it. Do you see what I mean? So they were codependent notions. Now we want to look just like how we're looking at the concept of the good and the bad, the object and the subject. Okay, and so there is a codependency there. How can I be an object without a subjective awareness? You know, how can I be a subject without an objective body for there? It's like, who has the subject then if I'm not physical? So the question becomes very complex in the sense that the questioner's density, which was really what fascinated Rene Descartes, because this dude was doubting everything. That was his doubt. You know, he was like Thomas the Doubter reincarnated. So guys, my attention has come on the chat section. I usually make it full screen and I talk. So the chat section is like a branch. I throughout the talk, like a bird, I fly towards it. So welcome everyone. We have okay. Yeah, welcome everybody. So question marks, Franny says, how can we grid our intelligence in our environment and make it contagious to all who step on the environment? um, there is a quote, Franny, which I totally see the motivation of your question. There's a quote where it was from Rumi, and if I remember correctly, he says, when I was younger, I wanted to change the world. Now that I've grown older, I am changing myself. So there is this attitude of a sort of urge towards the collective where everybody wants to help everybody, but then there's also the individual eyes of the person. So I would say, they would say 50% is philosophy, 50% is practice when it comes to yogic technique. So what does that mean? The philosophy is the awareness to the collective, and the practical part is the initiation of the individual. So some things you may be as a being collectively already familiar with, but your individual conscious mind doesn't know how to relate to, you know. So dear listeners, to take this talk, I think I've talked enough to take it up a notch. So if human beings in a world where they're considering that matter is leading to the immaterial, matter is the precondition of the immaterial, we will put our immaterial findings to the test of material laws. And in that case, it becomes something that Okay, guys, my attention is on the chat section. My mind's finding like a bunch of responses, but I know. Yeah, I'm just saying that when you're younger, I feel the person feels very, their individual spirit is active poetically, so you feel the life needs to have an individual purpose. But as you get older and you notice that you can't be victorious in the same way in all the fights that you've been fighting your whole life, you begin to see that you have to find a trust in the immaterial. So strangely, the way the world is designed, I feel like every old person may agree with this, that your desires change in quality in different phases of your life. When you're younger, you want to play games, you know, that are have a simple outcome. But as the person gets older, their energy levels increase. They just become a person more capable of handling more weight. So they want the game to also change. Now, you could be an incredible, intelligent person and excellent, let's say, soccer player, but you could be on the soccer pitch, and because you feel you're an excellent player, you don't feel you need to do anything. You know? There are situations where it's very, very complex in the evolution of the individual towards any sort of awareness towards the collective. It is also simultaneously the integration of the individual, therefore the destruction of the individual. So we are living like individuals. See that as the caterpillar. Now we're going through a metamorphosis, which is through language, the language of our times. And now we're noticing that the butterfly has a freedom that the caterpillar did not. And this freedom for the human being, I personally find it arises when they realize they're not a thought. A new life gets accessible to you. It's somebody's like, let's say somebody, this kid celebrated his birthday, but the kid was very scientific, and the kid's like, wait a minute, what's the birthday of an atom? You know? It's like, does energy have a birthday? I don't know. I don't know. It's like, when was energy born? It's like, So, dear listeners, there is an inner realm. I'm calling it the inner realm so that we can access it. Anything we don't define, we can't ideologically access. So if you think you're an individual right now, there is a certain acceptance and contentment that every archetype brings. And there is different cultural programs and social programs in reality. What do I mean by that? That means there's something called epigenetics. That means your behavior right now, it is from your DNA, your genes, your genetical information, and how you're genetically in a formation. So we are information physically, and we're not just static information. We're information in a changing world. So nobody is ever in one form. We are the awareness to multiple forms. At most, we can identify as a viewer of our life. Because if I was to define, like, imagine I was to identify with what I said yesterday, for example, then nothing would, no unknown dimensions will be found. Sometimes you as a human being have to know a sinking ship when you see it, and that's the role of intuition. The sinking ship of your own psyche. There has been many times I have walked a certain way only to realize I have been walking in accordance more to my inner realms and not the outer realms. I have said something that it was as if I wasn't aware that there was other perspectives in the room. Do you know? And so this is the most intimidating thing, that I feel a lot of people stray away from what actually knowledge is and what the point of knowledge is. You know? If you want knowledge only for improvement, that limits knowledge for you. That limits knowledge for you, because only when you see what you like, you accept. And that limits a lot of life. I realize, oh my God, if I'm just making my choices based on what I like, how many angles am I not seeing that I don't even know if I would like that or dislike that? You know, similar to how Terence McKenna says, nobody knows enough to worry. So first task as a creature, as 8 billion creatures on a rock in the middle of nowhere, was to stabilize a physical language which it exists. Whether people like it or not, we are speaking a language of existential sensitivity. That means it doesn't matter what language you're from. When you see a human being, let's say aliens in the future had immigrated, there was alien immigration, like actual alien immigration. Alien immigration. What does that mean? That means we had extraterrestrials living on our planet and becoming citizens of the human civilization, and we had citizens from Earth on that extraterrestrial planet also attaining immigration. Do you know? As if we had come into an interesting global citizenship, interstellar citizenship program. You know, imagine. So imagine now you're walking in the street and you see a bunch of aliens are bullying a human being, and you're a human being, and you don't even speak the language of that human being. That human being is a different, let's say, color, image, personality, culture than you. Do you know? But you're seeing a bunch of aliens bully a human being. Now, those aliens are technically members of the human civilization. So those aliens would come up to us and say, hey man, we're living here too. We're as human as you. And we'd be like, it's true. But it's like the lack of sensitivity to what is there. So if you saw your fellow human comrade on the battlefield of humanity and being bullied by aliens, you'll go to the aliens and you try to distract them until that member can recover. And then there come strategies of retaliation. That means in certain battlefield, you can say mentalities where if you're in a battlefield, the person is that the greatest strength that remains, that means the long-term strength of the army suggests uh, the victory. That means if you have, let's say, two armies back in the day, let's say gladiator times or something, ancient Greece or something, old school wars with swords and shields, you'd see a situation where the army that had the greatest stamina would win. So I would say back in the day, the general, what he fed his army was as important as how long his army endured. That means there were generals back in the day. They're like, no, the men don't need food. They're just pawns. And then there were generals who were like, no, we are trying to build an empire of kings. You know? And when I say empire of kings, I mean to raise the bar of human expressions, intensity and quality, because that's been why our ancestors have been alive. Usually parents always say we want to live for the better life of our child. But the better life of the child requires how much the parent has allowed the child to integrate with the world, that they have to understand there is so many things in life. You can sit and you can be rational or irrational, but you won't know until you enter the room. Knowledge is not just something that's written in books. you know it is something that is an event that requires a direct experiential participation. And if you fear who you will be if you change, you won't get to see yourself change. Trust me, we don't just fear external phenomena, we fear phenomena that never existed. We fear a lot of things that we are keeping as a real factor for ourselves. Now let's say, if I say this now, people are going to be like, "Yo, this isn't possible now." But so I'm gonna actually, this point of the talk is not dedicated to people who are alive now. It's dedicated to um, just anybody who's alive in the next 100 years. I don't know how soon immortal technology is going to come, but You know, the inner realms, imagine right now, we don't even consider it. Somebody goes and tells someone about something they visualize or something they notice in their subtler domain of their mind, and the person's like, buddy, you tell me your imagination right now, I only accept reality, but not realizing that how much of reality's meaning is visualized. That's the cool thing about human beings. This is why I feel wherever you are on the world, it may be true. You may be in the hardship of the lower classes suffering. That means you see people in the lower classes of more modern countries complaining. Then you're like, holy shit, those people who their countries are even way more messed up than that. It's as if, there's someone running for their life in one country. They look at the news and they're like, are people actually talking? They're not running away from the people. You know what I mean? So there are intensities in life that there is always someone on the battlefield more experienced than you and someone on the battlefield less experienced than you. But the point of being on the battlefield is the existential responsibility of an experience that is happening one in one way. So Eric says, perhaps, but humans are still unkind. I would not help Christopher Columbus if I saw him in the past. I mean, the only person who needs to help Christopher Columbus is a doctor, because that dude was so much on sea that he was sick. Like I can't even. I don't know how many days the human mind can be on a boat and the brain rocking with the waves that much. I think Christopher Columbus wasn't in the right state of mind, but at the same time, the morality and ethics of the land, of the different lands back in the day were different. That means it's as if it was an alien invasion. I'm not joking. Because Christopher Columbus, when he came to what we thought was India, that's why they say native Indians, but it was America, you know? When Christopher Columbus came, it was a situation where it was an alien invasion. Here's the thing, right now we're not a technological civilization, but imagine there was a technological civilization civil war. In that civil war, global civil war of a technological civilization, there would be a situation. I mean, not to get too archaeofuturistic about this, but for me, human beings are not perfect systems. Even if a person has an ability to do something good, we don't know if they are conscious of their ability to do good. You could be right now, who knows? Someone listening right now might be the greatest violinist in the world, but they don't know. They don't know unless somebody's like, "Hey man, here's a violin, try it out." You know? Unless that moment arises, the spirit of no craft can reach. That means what mastery and skill, think of skill and mastery not as something accumulated only. Think of skill and mastery as a spirit of the moment, as the soul of the moment. And if we had a sort of ancient mindset, archaic metaphysical context to this, it would be a situation where the general on the battlefield was not just looking at the soldiers, was not just looking at the other general, was not looking at the variables, unknown, known and unknown variables, but the person was also seeing the balance of heaven. As if, like in Star Wars, there's a scene that was very remarkable where the guy like beats a bunch of the bad guys, and then one of the bad guys is like, "Oh shit, the force is strong in this one," you know. So what that means, what is that force? What does that mean the force is strong? Does that mean that guy has power? No. It means the events of the moment require this guy to continue. The forces of heaven, the balance between heaven and earth that Sun Tzu saw in the battlefield in the art of war. That earth and heaven was the force, was the notion that nature's mind is here as well. But nature's mind does not speak the same way man does. So in what way can man really find the hidden language of nature? And now we have an ability. Now we could be like, all right, if we think our whole moment of being is just one room, chicken and egg situation doesn't make sense. But what if we realize it's multidimensional? What if the imagination is your secret office in the sky? Beyond the clouds, perhaps our eyes are open. For that seems to be the effort of external technologies. You know, for me, one of the happiest moments in my life was I was very it was a very I was very happy to do it. I was very grateful to be able to write this sentence. Someone who had really inspired me was Elon Musk. And I remember writing a sentence where I'm like, if I ever meet him, this is what I would say to him. And I wrote, "Go further, Elon, you Musk." I'll write it here in the chat section, yeah. That's the thing, because uh, the inner realms are a good salesman. The inner realms can make you see someone who you have seen as a friend for years suddenly as an enemy. It can make you someone who you saw as an enemy as your to see you for you to see them as your friend. The inner realms is how life is happening before it happens in a room. And I'm just giving that room a language because we haven't attempted it properly. I could totally see, like, Carl Jung was probably so irritated, but Carl Jung was a champion. He was a champion of psychology. Because many people don't realize this is why the psychologist is the hidden older brother of the philosopher. You're gonna see when a philosopher when a scientist debates with a philosopher and imagine the scientist is crushing that philosopher, you're gonna suddenly see the psychologist step in. Why? Because psychology, similar to philosophy, requires unknown variables to be able to explain behavior. Because our behavior is not rational. But if we want to judge everything from a rational standpoint, you know how many emotions we're not going to care for? So guys, Charles in the chat section says something nice. He says, heaven equals awareness, earth equals experiments, firmament equals psyche. Yeah, I would say it's Moria Ushiba, the founder of Aikido. This Japanese sage would say that it's like you are witnessing the Tao of the moment in the way that you're witnessing the movement. Listen to this, guys. You're witnessing the movement of heaven and earth. You're witnessing the movement of the soul of heaven and earth. That means, do you know what that means? That means you require um, a way to, you have to trust how your awareness is space. If you don't have that trust, you'll freak out a lot in this life. Because the imagination, guys, it is your private studio. You could be someone in a country where you don't have access to anything, but you have access. Your inner realms are free. Your inner realms are like the Transformers. You see a better car, you can instantly transform to it. You see a new idea, you can instantly the mind can move that way. You can say information is containing the psyche. The inner realms, its walls are how you have accepted information. What this means, what that means, what the world means, what the self means. These are all the walls. Giant walls projected of how the inner realms are authorized. In my personal experience, if somebody came up to me and said, hey, Mr. Within, what's the best way to pilot in your inner realms? I would say selflessly. Selflessly. Because the self can instantly change. In the inner realms. In the outer realms, it's stable. In the outer realms, you could move around and still notice that you're an individual object. But in the inner realms, if you choose to identify as a single point. You know what that means? It's just the evolution of visualization, what I'm saying. Right now, people, they're like, okay, let me visualize that. Imagine visualization always there. You're just not aware of it. Imagine that your imagination, you don't own your thoughts. Imagine you're an antenna. I'm not joking, guys. I really feel we're antennas. And that knowledge, it's as if our prayers are answered in the inner realms instantaneously. Because once the person knows what to pray for, that means they know there's some part of their mind knows what it's looking for. Sometimes the action of prayer indirectly was making the person realize what their problem was. I don't know if Terence McKenna knew it or not. He probably did. But Terence McKenna did one of the most important things a human being can do on this earth. He released the significance of the cultural program uh, from being the immediate filter of what is right and wrong. That means, do you know how complex the study of morality is? What is right and wrong in this world? It's so fascinating and complex that we be left to a point in awe where we're like, wait a minute, if we find a new way of doing something, that changes the meaning. So could it be that knowledge is this group vehicle we're all in, or as Buckminster Fuller and Marshall McLuhan would say, spaceship Earth? That's where the term comes from, where the term got popularized. That we are left having no choice after 100% being free to be separate and different to now experience a unity. What else is going to happen? You can't have a room getting more crowded and not having the people communicate. The overpopulation is another way where nature's saying, start talking, people, start talking. you know? It's so that's the thing, because if we identify as purely objective phenomena, we will never listen to each other. So when you notice that, when you can look at something, whoever's listening right now, what I'm saying is it should be very practical. Look at anything you're seeing, some object. Just zoom your attention like a camera on any object, some object around you. Okay. Now, I want you to close your eyes, and keep your eyes closed, and I'm asking you, for how long does the object linger in your inner realms as a subject? The fascinating thing, the thing that blew my mind about the concept of memory, was that I could close my eyes. That means no light is entering the eyes, no visual sense is active, you know? I could put my eyes on airplane mode and I'm just saying, like, you can close your eyes and you can remember an event where there was light in it. And I was like, what the fuck? What the fuck? So that's what fascinated me. The inner realms don't need open eyes to see light. You can close your eyes and visualize light. Now, here's the thing. The more egotistical you are, the more it's going to be treated as, you should call it, visualization. The more you're not a thought, you're less individual, that's where we can acknowledge it as the inner realms. Because let me tell you, how are you accepting the alphabet of image for truth? So I'm saying that we mastered moving as an object. Like when you see people doing parkour, or those videos of those guys who are putting their lives on the line to show you how far human beings can climb buildings, you know? Like, it's noble, but at the same time crazy, you know? That means I would only advise people doing parkour if they have jetpacks. That would be an incredible world, no? That would be a totally healthy world where we have these jetpack boosters, but it's not with flame and fire, so that causes burning. We have these jetpack boosts, and imagine the person no longer is going to work in a way where they're going on the bus or the subway. The person with this jetpack is leaping over buildings. Can you imagine that? And imagine some company comes and builds advanced shoes that when you land on impact, it doesn't hurt your feet. We would become literally like a grasshoppering jetpack advanced technology civilization. The worlds behind your eyes have a value, but because you only value what's in front of your eyes, you don't know how to value the inner realms, and this is something that happens for everyone. I don't even know how I noticed it. The only way I feel I noticed my inner realms was in a sense where I just wondered, who am I? Like, who's looking through my eyes? That question was the most transformative question of my life. It was like the great question that I knew that what I was seeing was something I had never seen before. It was the seer that has no shape. When I noticed that, I got angry, but not in a way where I wanted to break something. I got angry and I wanted to build something. You know how somebody gets angry, they like see something and smash it on the ground, you know? But you can say a great way, you can also release your anger creatively. You know what that means? Imagine there was a construction site and there was a shovel there, you know, and the construction workers is fighting with someone on the street. Someone on the street's arguing that construction worker, and the construction worker is getting angry, and he picks up the shovel and he's like, wait a minute, I'm not like my ancestors. And he's angry and still arguing with the guy, but he's just doing his work. He's smart. He uses the energy that anger brings for efficiency, regardless of the expression. That means if you're an angry person, you should either like I'm telling you this. If you're a person who has a lot of energy, when you get angry, do push-ups. That's it. Just have your conscience be like a drill sergeant, and it's like, give me 10 or give me 100. You know, that means that push-ups are the solution to anger because the energy has to be released. That's the thing about emotions. Now, I've noticed that women release energy differently than men. Women are way more comfortable having release points, ideological release points. You know, I personally find this, but I could be, you know, there's different kinds of people, of course. We're 8 billion people with different DNA, so you know what I'm saying at the same time. You know, so, but I'm saying like the notion is that it's about cultural program. The cultural program has accepted the feminine spirit as gentle and the masculine spirit as intense. You know? That means there were kings back in the day. They would go on the battlefield. They would be like statues of authority. But then when they would come into their chamber at night, the queen would realize there's a human being in there. So, guys, Kurt says something incredible, and I'm gonna definitely comment on your comment. Kurt says, when I was a kid, my brother went to so this is the chat section I'm reading. When I was a kid, my brother went to a market. I closed my eyes, but I was able to see all that he saw, everything. I knew precisely when he was just about to knock on the door when he returned. Crazy. Okay, let me tell you something even more intense, Eric, in the chat section. Do you know that the mind can see regardless if the eyes are open or not? Do you know that regardless of your belief on what the object is, the weather of the inner realm changes? Now the inner realm is event oriented. That's the thing. Behind your eyes, you're not, your body is an event. Love is so Charles says love is the recognition of our shared being. Yes, it is also the inner realm's authorization to no longer want to change the outer realms. Then you free yourself from the future. Then you actually are timeless, poetically speaking. I'm telling you, you can walk on this earth timelessly. It just depends on if you like to wear a watch or not. So Kurt, I would say you and the Sufi mystics, the Sufi dervishes would probably say you were watching from the eyes of your heart. I'm not joking. Hafiz, he would look from the eyes of his heart. There's a prophetic figure named Suleiman. He would also, he had accessed the gates of wisdom in his own heart as well. You know, anytime you access any gate of wisdom of the heart, what tends to happen is that you shift as if some initiation in the inner realms occurs where your value system is no longer self-centered only. Your self has been seen to be a collective event. So really for me, even though I am breathing, but then I wonder, why am I breathing? And then I ask myself, who am I breathing for? And then I realize I am breathing for my collective self. That means I could do whatever I want in this life, but the individual self is in a collective context. That's how it's being kept individual. That means, remember this, if they disconnect the general from the army, the opposing general will conquer everything, will win. That means any nation where the people are fighting the government, even though the governing power could be corrupt and motives can be questionable on both sides. You can question the motives of the citizen, you can question the motives of those in power. Both are questionable, you know? That means rather than dictators having to be just kill people massively on a huge level, all they had to do be like, hey man, you're saying I'm flawed, I'm saying you're flawed too. And that would bring it on equal grounds. The issue is the declaration. I mean, of course, there is physical differences, but I'm saying that you got to think of it this way, that nations are attempts at collectivity. They're just pioneered early attempts. It's the first prototypes, guys. We are so, it's fascinating, and I'm happy actually that we are all experiencing the first prototype of civilization. Even though it's updating through history and different advancements, right now skill is fascinating to us, but in the future technology can surpass our skill and our own skill may not be fascinating to us. You know, a person doing like a ridiculous backflip now on the street, people are going to be like, holy shit, did you see that? You know, but in the future, if technology surpasses that, we're going to be like, so what, man? I saw a robot do like endless backflips in the sky before it landed, you know? I even saw a robot that hasn't even landed yet. It's still backflipping in the air, you know? So you see what I mean? So technology can surpass what now we value as on a human level. So that's the downside of becoming technological too quick. You forget your natural value. Right? So that's why I'm saying human beings should have lives where we're piloting between different elevations. Certain points through the day, you should be open to novelty and technology. Certain moments in the day, you should actually just sit with the silence of the world and just just put your palm on the earth and just high five the world for 5 minutes. There's so many battles that you are only left with your eyes in a moving universe. And if you don't have the strength to endure through that, you should laugh because the strength is nature's strength. That means I was like the same way the letters of the alphabet are specific. In the same way, the world's meaning is specified based on the experiences. So I feel experiences are like an alphabet of meaning imposed on the objective phenomena as a subjective inner realm. So what I mean is that imagine you sleep. You're a person, you go to bed, right? And there's that moment where there's absence, there's the gap, you don't see anything, you just fall asleep, and then you wake up in a dream. Now imagine you woke up in the dream and you were just going with the dream, but suddenly in the middle of the dream, you noticed your breathing. You noticed your breathing, the sounds, the audible sound of your breathing, you know? Or another example of it would be you're dreaming and somebody's talking in the room, and as you are stepping out of the dream to wake up, you're noticing the difference between how they were like two rooms. So if in a dream state, you as a human being, your physical body is just sleeping in the bed, chilling, and your mind is simulating a body, and in that dream body, in that dream realm, in that dream state, you are noticing yourself breathing in the bed. This means the mind is living a life, whether we are asleep or not. Now you see why I'm saying the inner realms are important to study. And Carl Jung roared this. Carl Jung was a general earlier than me on the battlefield. For me, he is in some sense one of those human beings that's like, hey guys, instead of killing each other over the beliefs, let's see what the overall don't knows are. What don't we know? Because you can bond with someone over knowing something, or you can bond over fascination of an unknown event. That means imagine you were like on the street and suddenly a spaceship landed, and all the people who were there on the side of the street with you who saw the event, imagine you became friends. And you became friends not because you in some sense it was, even though you saw the same event, but the same unknown was there in each of your minds. Like, where did the spaceship come from? So the unknown is you can find known friends and unknown friends, you know? For me, the inner realms, if you don't know, if you're not familiar with it, you want to jump into it. That's the noob mistake esoteric societies are making. It's just so childish. It's so childish that there is. Let me tell you, it's like there's no point of keeping secrets in this dimension. We all know there are black holes. That means when I noticed that when the first time I heard the idea of a black hole in space, I was like, that's it. We can't know it. There's literally a giant black hole. We could imagine, have the most sophisticated AI in like 5,000 years start making the universal sector ready for human civilization and whatnot, and we're gonna be like, wait, or it can index and research and experiment everything. We can index the phenomenology, but we're gonna be like, yo, there's a black hole. Plus, even if there wasn't a black hole, it's all changing too. So that's the thing. For me, the fact is, how can we see a black hole in an entropic universe? In a changing universe, how can we see a part of that universe not changing? That's the fascination for me. That this world is too alive to be made lifeless and just measured. There is a life here, and it is an event. It's the event of the breath in the evolutionary biology. For that's the whole point. Because I was like, what do we deserve? As a species, not as a person. As a person, I have already seen what the destiny of the personality. It's just the species. And even though I'm saying species really intensely, but there's something there, guys. There's something where you're like, you want to know what those before you were looking at. And you know what? They were looking at you. They were looking at the future generations. They were like, we did it as the best we could. Now, what are you going to do? And then they went back into the void. For me, this is this dimension. I mean, I would say we are 8 billion designers. We are, there was this anime, Japanese comic book based, show, um, Dragon Ball Z or something. In it, there were the people. The main character was from a world where they had a warrior species. They had a warrior species. Imagine. So imagine a designer species, a species that is mastering its intelligence with design. That means if an extraterrestrial was like, hey, human beings, let me see your resume. Can you imagine in the future extraterrestrial employers? Imagine the first industrial trade deal between a terrestrial species and an extraterrestrial species, civilization. That would be so fascinating. The first trade deal. It's like, what did human beings trade with aliens first? You know? I'm just saying that that life is like, sometimes it's like a slingshot. Sometimes you just endure through it. It doesn't make sense, and the meaning just arises because you continue. That means it's like you can't expect to be on the top of the mountain with the first step. So what does that mean? That means success in this plane of existence is a journey. And I'm sure anybody who's built something in this world will tell you, yeah, building something is a journey. Life is a journey. And the reason we're even taking this angle that we have free will is because there can be analysis of different landscapes. So I would say that I could sit still and I have noticed my inner life. But I don't know how many people have noticed their inner life. And when I say notice the inner life, not I have noticed the same way that I'm not just an object. There's a subjective mystery of consciousness going on. There's at the same time, it is not about the lineage. It is not about per se only the genetical information. The genetical information is a tool. All the designs accessible to your attention as a moment of being, they are tools. They are evocations. They are evocations that have been evoked up before the emergence of the free will. And when you realize this, you will no longer see suffering as suffering. You will see suffering as the randomity where the creativity of a new order arises. Not a new order that is a statement. I'm telling you, this life deserves a freedom that is not bound to just ideological pursuit. Ideas are just the advanced technology we're using. It's like the person has a phone, they use a phone, or they have a car, they use that vehicle. So you have also an ideological landscape that you can identify with in any moment, in any way. So the unconditional freedom behind our eyes is what is allowing us to notice the value in a conditional and changing life, in the changing situation of a life, you know. Because it's no ideology can own it. That's my view. If somebody says, Mr. Within, what's your view on all this? I say, the truth is not in language, but you can chase it for eons in language. You can think you're a story. Because that was the challenge. If the Buddha was alive, I'd be like, hello, Mr. Buddha. You know, you know, I got a question for you. You know, it's as if enlightenment is there before the suffering, then why do we need to get enlightened? If if there is truth in the world, how could the untrue us be a shadow in a room when the sunbeams have roared in? You see, that's the thing. You are identifying either with an object, with a subject, or you are standing your ground in the unknown as the direct witness, and you are realizing this is okay. It is okay to be a pilot of a plane of existence. You're greater, everything in this life is okay. But the issue is that when the person becomes more important than the world, they stop living with the world. Sometimes you have to stop living with the world if the system of civilization is inefficient. That means it's as if I was thinking of, all right, I'm gonna go in this life, live a good life, have a family, and all this, right? You know, just go with the program, only to see the program doesn't even know its value. That means, you know what's even sad about being a sheep? Being a sheep in a way where the person doesn't even know if we were sheep what our value would be. It's tragic. It's tragic that there is always better ways things can happen. It's like it's the most hilarious tragedy, you know? For me, fearlessness had to mean the acceptance of fear. And you know what happens when you accept fear? Pretty much, you can do, I find, two things. When an intense and overwhelming, chaotic moment arises, you either, your free will still fights to navigate in that situation. If you can't navigate it out of it, an event takes place. That means whatever has happened to me in this life, I'm like, okay, that was an event. That was an event that took place. But now, what is the value of now? You know? We must pilot our attention to what it truly deserves, which is its greatest view. That means you as a human being, if you, I don't know, this is my view, of course, but if you wondered what you deserve, it's as if like the human being looking at the sky alone and being like, what is this? Being like, how is this going to unfold? It's like I can see the ink on the page of destiny as I make decisions in this life, but I cannot see the pen. I cannot see what holds the pen. You see, that's the thing about life. You can be as shamanic as you want, but at the end, it's the inner realm signal. So that's why the shaman, this was a shamanic technique. The dude would get a bowl, put a bunch of random objects like, I don't know, leaves, stones, feathers, and whatever, like in the bowl, and the person would throw the stuff in the bowl on the ground, and in an instant take a snapshot, take an inner realm snapshot, that when he looked at the stone, at the leaf, at the feather, what happened to the inner realms in that instant. Shamans were doing this way before this talk I'm giving. That means that in ancient times, they might have been, their outer realm technologies might have been slow. They might have not had too many sophisticated outer realm technologies, even though that's questionable too. But I'm saying their inner realms technologies were 100% more advanced. You know why? Because they had not disconnected their inner realms from the outer realms yet. Their outer realms appear to them as inner realms. That is why it was perhaps very hard back in the day to separate having the thought of a god from actually the presence of a god in a room. So imagine you're like sitting waiting at the bus stop and you suddenly think of Thor or Zeus. You think of like the lightning bolt of Zeus. And suddenly imagine in that moment it starts raining and you hear a thunder strike. And you're like, oh my God, is Zeus also waiting at the bus station? So your mind could maybe in earlier times there wasn't a discrimination. I mean, one fascinating thing I recommend everybody to listen to Jordan Peterson. He said something and I was like slow hand clapping behind my eyes. He said that we discovered the future. Just take that sentence in. We discovered the future. Can you imagine human beings being so in oneness and in the here and now that they didn't even know they could call the here and now here and now? And then we evolved to a capacity to individualize. Guys, for some reason I feel opening a mid-interval 5-minute Q&A just midway in the talk. So for 5 minutes, if anybody has a question and answer, ask it. I'm going to take an intermission at that point. Not for 5 minutes, like I'm going to take probably a 5-second intermission. Okay, sorry guys, needed an intermission there. So let's get back to this. Kurt says our birthmarks clues to our past. Our past. Since I was a kid, I'd been getting a sense they were part of a faint story. Yeah, they're just um, tattoos before you need to get a tattoo. Hiva says, in your opinion, does the ego have a valid place to sit at the table? The bravado that we all are so eager to diminish, can we harness it? That's exactly what I'm saying, Hiva. I'm saying that the ego is just a technology. It's like a vehicle. It's a vehicle for our individualism in a moment. It's not something you can fight. It's not just in a certain way. So I would say that here's the thing. They thought the identity, the individual, the sense of self of the person was the source of suffering because there was a self complaining about the suffering. Now, in ancient times, they didn't have a technological civilization. They didn't have an advanced civilization. Not like they didn't have a civilization like Civilization 1.0, like the civilization we have right now. That means for them, it was much more easier to step out of a world where there wasn't much to do in. You know, when the room's empty, you want to get out of it more. When there's activities in the room, you stay in the room, you know? So back in the day, there weren't that many activities, one can say. There weren't that much living. There was suffering, was had an intensity and roughness that many of us now we don't experience that roughness. So you can say they had this sort of intense suffering. They had no idea. They didn't have their knowledge hadn't branched out that much. And so I'm just saying that for them, it made sense to go to a world that the world was better. But now there is a civilization here. There's this science project that the yogis could not or did not see like this. You know. There we go, guys. Being human is saying exactly what Alan Watts, in some sense, also says. Oh wait! The last sentence, being human, it was like it was like incredible. Then oh no. So being human says the ego is nothing other than the focus of conscious attention, and the biggest ego trip is getting rid of your ego. And of course, the joke of it all is that your ego does not exist. Listen, just because it is something evocational doesn't mean it exists but instantaneously. So don't give the void too much power, being human, or you won't even care for the individuality. Because really, in this life, we shouldn't all be like trees. You know, there was a day, like I come from a Persian background, and I was talking to my father about meditation, and he told me that he saw these monks in the airport, and he's like, "Why are these guys being like trees?" You know. And of course, the notion of it is just what I'm trying to say about this was this idea, and I thought about it. At first I was like, my father doesn't see the depth in this wisdom, and then suddenly I realized he sees the depth, and it doesn't even matter how far you see of the depth. It's just that there is an individual design that can either be used or not. That means whatever inner realm analysis the person has, you're still existing as a physical being, you know? I would say the last sentence is Zen and traditional Zen and yoga. What they do, what they're trying to do is make you see beyond the individual. But if you can't and you've lived a life filled with suffering and intensity, you just want to get away from it all. That person who wants to get away from it all is not actually looking at the event that's taking place in the room. You know what that means? That means there is 8 billion human beings and the world is occurring as an event, and not everyone is actually looking at the event. Do you know? Let me tell you, if the person acts like sheep, then they deserve to be treated like sheep. Because they have accepted themselves first as sheep. You know? But if the person realizes they weren't a sheep, then you'll look at any sheep system of your past and you'll be like, okay, because just like how someone, let me tell you, it's not just people that manipulate. Events in your past can manipulate how you behave in the future. There was a time where I was just sitting down and there was a sort of distrust of the world I had as a kid. A strange, not distrust of expression. And I wondered why, and I'm like, okay, maybe I was like super young and I wasn't even conscious of it, but maybe somebody shouted at me, or maybe something scared me, or something intense happened, you know? So the past is, something that can possess you. An angry person is possessed by the righteousness of the past. And have you seen that YouTube video where there's like three people standing in a line, and there's this guy who, um, I'm just telling you what happened in the video. He slaps the back of this girl who's in the front of the line, but this is the third guy in the line doing this. The girl turns around and slaps the guy right behind her, as if she directed her anger not by actually examining the situation, but from what the past had justified was correct behavior. Anytime we allow an ideology to think for us, we are no longer free. This is why there was a point where I'm like, whoa, 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 whoa! I could believe any language. There's so many ways, of course. I could believe the whole universe is shaped like a coffee cup, you know. But what's the value? The advantage of the belief is, yeah, it makes me feel like I'm walking in truth all the time. But the disadvantage of the belief is that you don't actually see what's going on. You are stuck in your inner realms. And let me tell you, I've experienced both sides, tripping on both sides, falling down on both sides. The way you fall down in your inner realms is you get attached to the rhythm. The way you fall down in the outer realms is you get attached to the object. This is why preferenceless, the gate of preferenceless is anybody who's noticed the unknown through that. That means probably the unknown has approached you, you feel. Then you will have had the wisdom to realize it's not an ideological attachment to the personality of a creature in another dimension. These theosophists were next level back in the day, you know? I'm like, okay, so what? Let's say there's a being in another dimension. So what are you gonna say? It's like, how you doing, Billy? Like you see, it's like it doesn't matter. It eventually you are left with realizing you're the pilot. So there's a metaphysics that's like, guys, the story's cool, let's chase it. And there's a level of metaphysics that's like, guys, hold on with the stories, let's look at the physics, let's see how far we can know the physics. And then let's wonder in those unknown spaces where man uncharted territory of conscious expression, how we're going to bring about an advanced civilization. That's the whole point. It's a design problem, the world. It's not the inner realms can adjust. That's how we've been surviving. That means if you really think about it, how has the fittest been surviving? I mean, sure, first it was strength-based. If you were strong, you lived on. If you weren't, you died. There was a saying that would say the weak die at first in battle. This is why For example, this is my, at least this is my personal analysis on the Bhagavad Gita and Mahabharata, and pretty much my this opinion I have on all the holy wars. Because when I say holy wars, I'm not talking about religion. I'm talking from a metaphysical, divine wars, interdimensional wars. I'm telling you, there's a pattern. In ancient Greece, there was a war between the Titans and the gods. In Vedic thought, there was the Devas and the Asuras, you know. And so that means as a dimension becomes conscious of itself, it begins to communicate with other dimensions. As it communicates to other dimensions, it is the co-creation of dimensions. So you can say we are not creating the world, but we are creating how we see it. Whereas Epictetus could say better than me, we suffer not from the events inside our lives, we suffer but from the judgments we have about them. You don't suffer because a physical event happens, like atoms don't care about pain, you know. You know, but it's, you suffer because of the conscious shift in the psychological disposition of your world, of your experience of your world, you know. So I'm telling you, imagine we have fast forwarded 3,600 years in the future, and we have come close to the phase in an advanced civilization of becoming interstellar. That means we have surpassed the Type 3 civilization. Oh, sorry, we have not surpassed the Type 3 civilization. We are a civilization that has the technology, has the potential to, I'm just saying, imagine a time like right now, back in the day, like imagine the Wright brothers. They're like, all right, let's help everybody fly. So they had to go and recruit pilots. You know, and I'm saying, imagine in 3,600 years from now, there is a pilot walking in the streets of that humanity, and saying the sky cities of that humanity, and saying that we now need interstellar pilots. So imagine someone in the future coming to recruit interstellar pilots. You know, people who are willing to surpass the dimensions of their familiar realms, to explore the unfamiliar. That's the sacrifice of exploration. That's the sacrifice of any great work, where it takes energy from your life. So everything in this life takes energy. Even eating food is taking energy as you're gaining energy. You know what I mean? That means it takes energy to get energy. Yet everything is energy. For me, I would say what can be considered a sort of supernatural element of nature is the classification, the static classifications upon reality as the day change on. For me, I was like, wait a minute, is memory and imagination happening in the same place, in the same room? And so that's when the inner realms, the self that I thought I required to be in the inner realms, was ideological. I thought I was just a person. Little did I know energy has been present in ways that the conscious mind is like a little infant looking at the mystery of how the building's architecture was placed. That means the way I feel the unknown and the greater dimensions of this world are, it feels to me as if we're a toddler looking at the edge of a skyscraper. Sorry, not at the edge, looking on the ground at the top of the skyscraper. Can you imagine that supreme height? And imagine an advanced civilization where children are born and they're like, no way so many events of this advanced proportion is going on. That means right now people can't wait to get some sleep in this civilization. You know, but imagine a civilization where people can't wait to get up. They can't wait to wake up to it. That means just because the system is inefficient, we're thinking it's like hell and we want to escape into a heaven. But I'm telling you that if the system's hellish nature is design oriented, because design is a law that surpassed morality. That means for me, I don't know why, I think the religions missed it out, you know, the monotheistic traditions, but there should have been an archangel of geometry. There should have been an archangel of pure design. That means it was the spirit of not nature, of no story, idea, no individual classification. It was the vision of the designer. And this designer is not a concept. Because let me tell you, the moment you shape something, it can get attacked. This is why when I give these talks, I know that the talk has a life of its own. And so the armor of it is my tone. So I'm telling you that we are conditioned in a civilization where first we think through language, then image. This denies us the spontaneous freedom of the mind. There is a freedom. You know, there's a view that, I gotta sit down and think of something. Then there's a view that thoughts are everywhere. Which one? Which one to choose? So when I speak, if I don't know if people notice it, but the inner realm's landscape is vast. So that means it's like, here's the thing, when a point is stuck in one dimension, either it is stuck till infinity and it's like a simulation till the end of time, or that point realizes there is other dimensions, other lines passing through it. And so for me, the mind is a line, the body is a line, and the soul is a line. But the soul is the unknown, the body is the known, and the mind, God knows what the mind is doing. The mind is oscillating between the known and the unknown. The mind, when it has fear, it's like, okay, I don't want to exist right now. And when it has like suddenly joy, it's like, definitely I want to exist right now, you know? So the mind, it's different states. I can't even, like, there's no way a human being can be defined by language. And I will challenge ad infinitum, you know, anybody who has who wants to challenge this point. Because really, imagine being a child that hasn't learned language yet, but you have a personality, you can see things, you're aware. So it's like silent living. Like all children, young children, before they learn language, are living like Zen masters, you know? And what's fascinating is that if we treat the human being as an event, we eradicate the concept of worship. Because worship means your attention doesn't change from where it was on. That means in this life, just imagine it's just an event where stuff is happening before there's meaning. Just like how, you know, before there's the language, you know? So what does that mean? That means life is a changing event of a direct experiential attention, and the contents in this attention, based on how the person identifies with it, if I can identify right now and be like, you know, this coffee cup, I could hold the coffee cup in my hand and identify this coffee cup as a part of my hand. You know, the hand and this coffee cup in my hand are one. You know, but that identity, you know, there comes a point where suddenly it becomes heavy reality. So this is why it's as if there requires honor alongside the eternal compassion of the eternal light, the present non-dual. There's some human beings right now, probably a lot of them, who are listening to my talk, and they are just presence more than they are a personality. Because honesty surpasses desire. Just by looking at the idea of it. Desire was a short-term solution. Honesty was a long-term solution. Those who had the long-term solution, they maneuvered in the short-term easily. This is why all businesses have a short-run analysis and a long-run analysis. analysis. You want to see how the system is going to function in the long term and how it's functioning in the short term. For example, anytime there is rioting that goes on in the world, the rioting tends to be based on a short-term event, you know, that wants to change the long-term system. But sometimes when there have been revolutions in history, for example, certain French Revolution, I believe, where the revolutionaries, they came into power and they couldn't give in. They were like, holy shit, this palace life? You kidding me? So the people who were poor, it's like, this is why Friedrich Nietzsche says one has to be careful in fighting a monster to not become a monster in the process. He who stares into the abyss, the abyss stares back into him. So that means if you are a creature of identity, I'll be honest, the easiest way, like if somebody, manipulation would just be your environment. That means you could even get possessed by your environment changing. This is why I'm telling you, every person in this life, go get a plate, like, just trust me on this, go get a plate from your house, like a plate, you know, ceramic plate or whatever. The cheapest plate you can find in your house, but it has to be ceramic. And go on a distance where you're 2 meters or 3 meters above in the air, and just hold that plate and experience holding it, and don't let go. Just hold the plate in the air and keep holding it, and just see for yourself how long you as a human being can hold it. And the moment where you can't hold it anymore, also notice how you can let it go. Or even better yet, first just look at the plate. Just place the plate down, look at it, then hold it in your hand, then smash it to the ground. You know, don't just even let go of the plate. Just smash the plate consciously to the ground. Because these 3 dimensions are what we require to acknowledge if we want to pilot in this world. There is a creative dimension to things that requires to be honored. There is a maintaining dimension to things. You got to honor that. That's Vishnu in the Vedic tradition. There's a destruction factor to things. That's Shiva. The creator factor was Brahma. These are archetypal forces. These are like the archetypes, the 3 major archetypes of the archetype, which are actually the world's movement. Because really, we either see ourselves as one moment that, like a cake, has been made into a bunch of pieces, and we're like, oh, that's my past, that's my future, this is my present, this, this is that. Or we see it as one cake. That means some people, they throw cake on their face, some people throw their face into the cake. That's the mystical approach, you know? You're throwing your face into the unknown to realize that there is some part of you that is the excellent, timeless watcher. That means its excellence is because there's nothing of it that can be taken away. That's unconditional awareness. That's the true glow of mysticism. Mysticism is not like ideological systems that the outcome is a conclusion. Mysticism and yoga are like horse riding. That means it's like it's an experiential activation. The outcome of the whole enlightened search was just to realize the value of the light in your eyes. So when you notice the worlds behind your eyes, you notice you're noticing them. And most people notice and they realize they're like, wait a minute, who's aware that there's a body? And then they're like, me. And then the person's like, who's aware there's a me? And then that's the silent witness, which mysticism was trying to keep alive, and all the Buddhist and Zen and mystical practices in the world, they were trying to keep it alive. And you know how it stayed alive? Through love. That means many people may wonder why religion, like certain atheists are like, I don't understand how this ancient ideology is still growing. It's because it talks about love. But in secular society, we don't see love, we see responsibility, duty towards humanhood, human decency. But the love is missing, the great ethos is missing. So for me, this is the value of Jordan Peterson, I find, that this human being, he came into the scene where, let me tell you, life is events, and it's not just physical events. And the School of Athens back in the day was the greatest movie theater alive, possible at the time. That means there weren't cinemas. People would just go and sit in a room and they would listen to philosophers from different parts of the world shout at what they felt the clear mirror of reality was. Because they entertained the spirit of rhetoric. They had no judgment on an individual level because they didn't have a view that they were individuals. They were like the soul of the moment is speaking through that person, then it's speaking through that person, then through that. The attention to the significance of how the intelligence moves. So it's like there's some people who just feel the wind, and there are those who are already flying. They say your choice matters. But if you are matter only, how can your choice matter? Our greatest question should be, do atoms care, do electrons care about emotions? Do atoms give a shit about our human emotions? So what I'm trying to say is that the materialistic approach requires the immaterial to be a reverse of. There is no such thing as one painting on the wall being like the Lord of the Rings, one idea to rule them all. It's like, yeah, give me a break. None of the ideas rule them. But the interesting thing is a lot of rules are found through ideology. So here's the complexity where we have to maintain the illusion, because human beings are not just living in one phase. When you're young, you don't need to listen to mysticism that much because you need experiences to look back on. You need enough experiences to ignite your inner realms. If you have enough experiences to ignite your inner realms, it doesn't matter where you are. And if you just open up to the idea of endless endurance, that means immortalizing your patience. So there was a time that I had to wait a lot. Just that's a part of life. You just got to wait for things sometimes, You got to wait for the bus, you got to wait for your destiny, Some people are like, oh man, when's my destiny getting here? It said 5 minutes ago. What is it? And imagine your destiny, the bus of your destiny arrives, and then you're like, oh man, I don't have the ticket. What is this? You just look at the bus driver and you're like, hey man, we're just humans trying to live. Do you mind if I just kindly, step here? I'm going to pay twice the next bus I get on. And the guy's like, all right, I'm feeling happy today. I'm just saying that if the world encapsulates itself in just one inner realm image of the outer realms, we miss out on how advanced the outer realms could be. There is no truth, and I don't even think human beings should try to find the same truth. Truth should be a participatory event of a global and collective level unseen before. In Italy, there was a Renaissance, and what does that mean? What was the whole point of the romantic vision? We see a lot of in romantic behavior in movies, but where did that archetype arise? What was the point of the realism of the romance? That we as human beings, we don't just care about ideas, we care about the realness of the moment. And that is where love is truly born. It has to be something real. Because if it's not real for you, then it's as if it's like the idea of love you have is it's like Albert Einstein says, the eyes that create the same state of consciousness that created the problem is not the same state of consciousness that can find the answer. What does that mean? That means the first way you look at something, and if that's problematic, that means if you keep looking that way, the problem exists immortally. So the issue with suffering is that people have immortalized events of the past in a present that never needed that smudge on the mirror. Your inner realms is the gift from the gods. That's the only gift I consider. Just the fact that we can notice stuff. Because when I look at an animal in nature, a lesser evolved creature, you know what I see? I see the most honest. I see the innocence of a child in the animal. It doesn't matter if it's a bear. It doesn't matter if it's a grizzly bear or if it's like a cuddly hamster. Like, you know what I mean? It doesn't matter what it is. It's just innocent because it's naturally here. And when you, as a human being, or abide by the natural innocence of your being, there is a signal in all human beings that they can't destroy the simple. So when I go into complex situations where I see my free will has an inefficient output, if it expresses, I listen. I become the ears of the moment, and sometimes my voice has already commanded me. The renaissance that will happen in the future is a multidimensional renaissance. It means that back in the day, people were like, there is something more. It was the search for a hidden paradise that made the ethics, made the sense, in the most simplest way I can say, what the human being felt correct. Let me tell you, you don't accept what is separate from you because you want to remain separate. But when you realize the world is one event, you fear nothing. Fear is the greatest storyteller. But wisdom is never a story. This is why when I speak, I know, like, I trust me, I know there's some yogis, some very liberated yogis in India listening to me, like, what is this kid saying? You know, but I'll tell you why they're saying that. Not because of the what I'm like the in regards to the Vedic standpoint. I think I've been very accurate, but in regards to the experience, let me tell you, ideological systems either have to change or they have to change their world. That means a belief system either has to eradicate in uh, its skeletal design has to evaporate, or it becomes something where guys, all I'm trying to say is the species is evolving beyond subjects into a recognition that life is a rhythmic event. We think it's empty space, but Mr. Within is saying that it's like an ocean. In this ocean, there are currents. The fish can move in the current. Imagine a fish suddenly going in a current and be like, oh my God, how am I moving so fast? How am I moving at this peak level of mastery? You know, only to realize that it was the intelligent current. So I feel we have to become such an advanced civilization that we can communicate with intelligent rhythms. Because these rhythms for me seem to be a potential root origin of the archetype of the dragon. Because imagine you're like some villager kid back in the day on a rice field at night, and you're just working at night. Let's say your family's having a tough time and you're this little kid and you're like, okay, I'm going to work 24/7, you know? And so you're this kid working at night in the rice field, and you suddenly look up and you see there is a dragon Imagine you look up and you see a black and white dragon in the moonlight spiraling around one another in the silence of the night, not making a single noise. It's just wind, you know? And so imagine seeing this. So you would see those dragons as just a rhythm. So I could say when a rock star goes in the zone, when a musician suddenly goes into a trance state through the instrument, you know, a sort of celestial release of the mind through musical chords, you know. These intelligent rhythms. So for me, the dragon's the same thing that was like a dragon for that villager kid. For the fish in a current in the ocean, it's like the same. You know, guys, I think today is a good day. We can celebrate that we have added a dimension to uh, the contemplation of the archetype of the dragon. Honestly, nobody has ever asked me this, but if somebody asked me, Mr. Within, do you feel there are collective beings? I would say yes. I would say the same way we can see that in matter there has arose intelligence, there is definitely like 100% in my view at least. Okay, okay, here. Let's say 99.9999999%, you know? I'm just telling you, like, intelligence is presence, and presence is observation. Observation on a physical level translates as alertness. Observation on a non-physical level translates as vision. So I could tell you that the future, as Jordan Peterson was saying, it was discovered, the person was just hovering in oneness and was like, whoa, 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 whoa. Is there a tomorrow? So it was as if it was like the future was the evolution of the inner realms. That was a phase in the evolution of the subjective realm, the subjective evolution. They don't teach it in schools, and I don't know why. They teach how matter became complex, but when it comes to the mind, hey guy, it's all abstraction, you know. No, it's not. It's data. It's information. It's part of the forest that we got to look at and be like, okay, why is it that when I close my eyes my attention can move as a subject, and why is it that subjects can become echoes of your attention? That means really what I feel is present when it comes to looking at presence. It's really Taoistic. That means it's like somebody went to Lao Tzu and said, is this truth? And Lao Tzu was like, buddy, if you're talking, it's not. Because he wanted to, in some sense, make people confront that the void is a member of civilization. That means, like, I wondered, why is it that I'm just valuing the moments of my life that are full? Why don't I value the emptiness? Why am I just seeing significance of intelligence to just the visible? When we all know, it's even scientific, that we are perceiving through a certain frequency in the electromagnetic spectrum. You know, that means there's a way, like, you can see human beings as just like their body, and there's a way you can see human beings as electromagnetic fields, everything, you know. So in science, like, there's the force of gravity, and then there's electromagnetism, and then there's the nuclear strong and weak forces generally. So I would say this is an electromagnetic lens upon the translation of everything in reality. I'm speaking through that scope. On an electromagnetic level, there isn't psychological explanatory power. There is, like, some events in life. It's like you could be a great violinist, but it's not a time to play the violin. And so what you are in that moment is you are the spirit of the moment. You're the watcher in the moment. There's many moments in my life where I have just passed by. And there's been some moments where I've just engaged, like, charged that. And there's been some moments where I realize wherever I have gone, whatever I have done, existence has always had the experience of being here. That means we can fathom non-existence, but wait, we're still existing. So you see, it's for me, it's like life is, look, a civilization is like it's like a theater. It's like a theatrical performance, like a Shakespearean performance, and every living entity is just arising as a part of this picture, a part of this play, part of this play of elemental forces, the complex movement of elemental forces towards an ability to be subjectively self-maneuvering. You know, like Jacques Lacan, this philosopher, he had this incredible idea where he's like, the most important event in a child's life is the moment where the child looks in the mirror. That means all those people who look in the mirror and they see weakness, you are forgetting why mirrors were made. They were not made to make lions into sheep. It was made to make you realize like there is authorization. That means everybody exists equally. You can't go to someone and be like, yo, I exist more than you, haha, you know, like you can't. Existentially, there's a equality that's just, we're all here as part of the event. But experientially, now this is where I'm trying to say that we should revolutionize psychology by seeing that everybody has an inner realm. So right now, the psychologist sits on the one side of the table, and the client sits on one side of the table, and the psychologist is like, tell me about your life. I would say, no, that's unupdated, that's archaic, you know. And the psychologist is like, yes, at the end of the session, you know, it's like the person felt more good about themselves. It's like, you really? That was the point of the psychology? Let me tell you, no. The point of the psychology is it has to be advanced in the sense that the psychologist sits down. It's like, first of all, buddy, why are you here? That should be the first thing the psychologist says to the client. Why do you need this? What's up? What's up in your life that's like this? And I'm saying now, if the psychologists of the modern age, they embrace this notion of the inner realms and the outer realms, the psychologist would look at the person and be like, hey man, so tell me what's going on in your outer realms. What's physically happening to you? Like your food, your diet, your interactions with people and all this. Tell me about that. And then the psychologist would be probably then, by having the position of the words, the concept of the inner realms, then the psychologist would be like, hey man, just for a second, be honest and tell me what's going on in your inner realms. Like, how are you feeling about your outer realms? And then imagine the guy's like this next level intense politician, and he just breaks down crying. And that's actually the face of his inner realms. So there could be so many tough leaders. There could be the dictators of nations who go out, who after they go and they act like dictators, but they go in the mirror, they look at themselves and they cry. They cry because they know it's as if it's the addiction of the hand that they chose to go all in on. So that's why we need pilots and collaboration. You know, this is why that it's like when there's a group of people, there is like 10 world solutions to a situation, for example. That's the power of friendship, really. That there is the unknown inner realm of someone else who could be like, all right, let me see how I could see it from my lens of living, you know, and share something, you know. So I'm telling you, imagine the psychologist says, tell me about your inner realms, and the person then has a voice, has a way they can speak, and the person's like, yeah, there's some moments in my life where I'm on the stage and I'm being tough and intense and being an authority, but then my inner realms feel weak and I just want to go and write poetry, you know, climb a tree and sit on a branch and write poetry. You know, I don't want to be a dictator, imagine. You know? So the person becomes the psychologist then has an advanced approach by evoking and allowing the speaker, that person who feels depressed. So if imagine someone comes to you and it's like, hey man, I'm having problems in my life, I'm stressed, I'm depressed, I'm weak, what do I do? And you're like, okay man, so let's look at your outer realms. In the outer realms, you see the person has no problem. The person's living a normal life. Then you're like, okay man, so let's see your inner realms. Then you see the inner realms of the person, you tell them why, and it's because maybe someone just treated them bad and they couldn't release it on themselves, so they had to release it on their world. Because it's like, it's easier to hate the world than hate yourself. But if you're wise, you'll hate yourself if you're in if there is cruelty emanating. Cruelty is like, I'll be honest, the stupidest way to live. Anybody who's being cruel, it's like it's so archaic. It's like even animals are like, yo, that's too animal, you know? It's like based on the update you have, it's like giving someone a Ferrari, but the cruelty is like them driving it at 10 miles per hour. It's like you don't understand the value of the civilized human being. That we can consciously build an event. If you fear your eyes, you'll never see what they are. Fear, as Hafiz says, is the cheapest room in the house. I would like to see you living in better conditions. Hafiz says that. That means the man who fears is the man who has allowed the fear. That means any human being choosing to be weak over strong. Let me tell you what the issue of it is. I'm not saying an artificial strength. I'm saying that you have a choice. That means the person's like, why do I have free will? Yeah, to make a choice. And that choice is how the context and the concept evoke. That means, have you noticed that if you really care for someone, you would also care for their inner realms? That's what I think really true care is. You know? Parents have to understand this, that the child is a world emerging behind their eyes. So if the parent is angry in front of the child only has angry expressions. The child doesn't have the only alphabet the child is given is anger if the parents are angry. So the child, when it goes outside and people are like, how are you? It's just trying to relay that information. Children, I feel honestly, we should create a safe haven for children. You know, we should have different bubbles in civilization. We should create a multidimensional civilization where we have pure lands, where children are all born in the pure lands, and then they come and see the cruelty. Do you know? The idea is either the world evolves or we do. That's it. So you got to care for both. You got to pilot through both elevations. And the value, I keep being drawn to this. That why has imagination shown its unknown face? Because it is also alive here. Your imagination is how the world is moving before you. Your reality is how you are moving before the world. And the wheel of karma, in the center of it didn't move. The center of the wheel of karma doesn't move. If it's a wheel, that means it's rotating around a static point. Because for me, there's some moments where I feel life is very blessed and pleasant, and there's a supremacy of nature, that nature knows what it's doing regardless of what the human being thinks. And then there's moments where I feel the human being is a design. And so when we look at a phenomenon of design, we tend to see utility. And so in life, if you don't have purpose, if you don't have a sort of teleology, the study of purpose, you see, like the telos is very crucial to find. The telos is when you see a human being with purpose, regardless. That means their inner realms has attempted to build something that they're, regardless of how the weather of the outer realms is, they're sheltered by their inner realm vision. That means, you know how many times in life people have come to me and I've seen different sort of faces. Look at my YouTube channel, you know. And so, you know what I noticed? How can anybody judge a project that isn't finished? How can you see a completion to your purpose of life when in some sense the roller coaster ride hasn't ended? So the inner realms is really finding man's greater position in nature, a sort of freedom of mind That means the only way your mind can be free is if it was flawless from the beginning. Because those are the austerities of the mystical path. You can't, like, if the algorithm is study yourself. Usually people are studying everything but other than themselves. They are not the most interesting point of their lives. But when you become the most interesting point of your life, the reason you're becoming interesting to yourself is because you're realizing you have unknown dimensions. Everybody does. Everybody has unknown dimensions to them. It's just like whistling. It's like you never knew someone could whistle. You know? But they could, yeah. I think the healthiest global approach is that we treat every human being as an instrument that we have no idea what kind of music they're going to play. And we don't know what kind of musician they are. Like, are they going to be a musician who uses their instrument to break the other instruments in this grand symphony? Or are they going to be a musician who just, for a moment, just looks at their life from wherever they are? And you just release your weapon of resistance upon the natural world. That means I'm telling you, this is the only thing a human being needs to do, and I think they can pilot smoothly in this life. Go up to a tree, just put your hand on the tree, and just keep it there for a long moment. And when you have kept it enough, you'll know. Just say, I see you. And that's it. If you see where the greater value is, you have already piloted. 3 words which will usher in Civilization 2.0, where sky cities shall allow us to build the heavenized earth. Rise, mankind, rise. For what else can we do? That means that you ask the person, hey man, why do you care about greatness? He's like, what else can we do here? Like, how long can you stare at your inefficient self? That is the question. Like, there was a time I was like, why have I been hiding to my own life? Why have I been hiding from my own life? And that's when I realized, because the life of the world had denied me from noticing I was a person. I was a moment of observation and then navigation. For an advanced civilization means higher speed. This is why in any, like, I have this whole thing of trying to create School of Athens 2.0. I'm going to share with you something I had created. This is a science fiction story of a book which is not complete. But I could tell you I was just crafting the science fiction chapter. Writing for me is like making a sculpture. What that means is, like, because if you just get rid of the element of time, if you just have no deadline and you're not bothered by time, then you can focus on the skill, you know, on the true nature of the skill. When you allow your eyes to open, it means a part of your psyche has already stepped into the Pure Lands. The potential is there. And this thing I'm telling you about life being like riding a horse, I'm going to tell you a story. There was a king, and he loved his children, his young children, this king of this land, you know. And the king commands these rare horses, and he loves his kids so much, and his kids love horses, you know, that the king commands, he's like, we need these horses. I need the greatest horses in the land. I'm king, for God's sakes. You know, it's like, what is this? Give me the best horses. You know? And so they bring the rarest and most unique horses from the land. But these horses, they're like rare and they're the best horses. They're the horses the children of the king want. But these horses are too wild and savage. And the king's like, no way, these children are gonna get on these horses. You know, so he suddenly says, "I'm the king." Yeah, he suddenly looks at himself in the mirror. He understands why that weight is on his forehead. You know. Sorry, guys. I just noticed I have two story timelines open. So the science fiction thing, I'll get back to the story with the horse. But just the science fiction thing was pretty much I created a character that was hovering in this sphere, which was this advanced kind of spaceship technology, but it was like a bubble. This kind of like spherical, futuristic bubble, and this child from an alien civilization is there, and inside this glass looking like sphere orb in the sky, this impenetrable glass orb, the inside the glass orb, like a screen, the child sees suddenly the projection of his mother and father telling the child, our civilization got destroyed, but we have given you enough stories. And the child is like a very young. The child is not even, I remember writing it, the child was so young, the child couldn't even acknowledge the parent's existence. So imagine like Superman before the child was like, I don't know what the point of this, like how I had written it. Honestly, I'll find it, and in a channel I'm dedicating to my science fiction, I'm going to share it there. But pretty much the idea of it was the kid enters Earth. He has a cousin, he has an uncle in Earth who's working for an agency, and he comes to Earth and he puts his hand on a tree and he gets all the memories of the planet. He becomes the most advanced being by just touching one tree, you know. So that was the sci-fi thing. Now back to the horse story. The king looks at his children crying, and it's like, oh my god, these are going to be future leaders. They shouldn't cry, you know. So the horses are too erratic and too crazy to be tamed, and so different people come to tame it, and the king's watching, and the queen is covering the eyes of the children, and these people try to tame these wild but very exotic horses, and the people fall, and like someone breaks their back, and the king's like, holy shit, this is too dangerous, nobody can do this. Different people come and try, and nobody can do this, nobody could put the saddle on the horse and get on it. Then the king is like, I'm going to set out a reward, and he puts like this reward, this like huge reward, and he's like, whoever can tame, come here, and so this eventually this one kid comes, this one like very simple, minimalistic kind of Vedic minded uh, guy. He comes and he says, king, I'll tame these horses, but under one condition. And he's in the royal house. That means that's a very honorable thing for a person who at the time you can think has dwelled in the forests. So what happens? The king says, what's your condition? What's that condition? And the kid says, I need a year with the horses. And the horses are so crazy that the king's like, okay, like there's no other option. Like, there's nobody saying anything better. He's like, all right. And he tells the kid, we know where you are. Like there would be someone there where. I don't know. Like there would just the kid was, anyways. Actually, I don't know. Let's not add that. The kid takes the horses through a wagon or something, and they take the horses somewhere, and the king doesn't hear about it. Let's say they give a wagon to the kid, and the horses are in the wagon, and the kid just takes the horses. And so the wise councilmen of the king, they're like, King, holy shit, you just gave your horses to this random guy. He's like, whatever, I'm a king, I'll find him. You can't run away. Something like that. A year passes by, and a year and 1 month, you know, and 11 days. Some time passes, and the king's like, all right, this kid's not showing up with the horses. What is this? Then, to his surprise, he sees the kid is on one of the four. There were four horses, let's say. And he's on one of the four horses, and the other three horses are behind him. And they are following the guy even without him having a leash. Even without him needing to connect a rope to the heads of the horses. The horses are following, and the king is shocked. He's like, no way, this guy's like the horse whisperer or something. How do you do it? And the king suddenly brings him into the throne, and he's suddenly known in the world as the person who served the king, and and so that he's also given his reward and an honor position and a title and all this stuff. And then the king is sitting at the table. He's even given permission to sit at the king's dinner table. And the king says, tell me, why did you need a year? And the kid says, I'll tell you what I did. And everybody's listening. Everybody from all levels of the of let's say the government of the kingdom, and everywhere, everybody's listening. He says, and this is a yogic story, guys, by the way, for the four horses suggests the four paths of yoga. The guy says, the kid says to the king, I took the four horses and I freed them. And everybody gasps. What? He freed the wild horses? Who would have ever thought of doing that? They were all trying to unfree the horse. The guy says, I released the four horses in a vast field. And the horses were in their heaven. And the horses began adapting to a natural life, a life of nature. The horses would graze, would eat, would drink by the river. And then the king's like, how did you control them then? Something like that. The guy says, I didn't put a saddle on like your people, like on the horse. I went and I took my food. Every time the horses would graze, I would sit beside them and I would eat. Every time they would go drink by the water, I would drink water with them. Every time they would just, in every state the horses were, the guy just stayed with the horses and he became part of it. And he says after a while, the four horses thought I was a fifth horse. Like this weird fifth horse. So he, through the natural environment of the horses, bonded with the horses on an equal ground. On a ground where he wasn't taking away the freedom of the horse. Which governing institutions, that algorithm still resides, but the future programmers, political programmers will excellently handle it, And as they say in Parliament, order, order. That voice is the solution. The guy says, I was with the four horses so long, they accepted me. I was a fifth wheeled horse among them. And he says that there came a time where I put my hand on the first horse. He put his hand on the first horse and the horse freaked out. The horse was like, yo, who are you? What is this? You know? I'm just trying to give a personality to horses, but horses, of course, don't have personality. Like it's animal instinctual level, their psychology. So the guy puts his hand on the horse. The horse doesn't trust the man, doesn't trust the human species, you know. And then man suddenly tries again after like again for like a week, just being with the horses. After a week, he puts his hand. The horse doesn't have a problem. And then the guy sits on the horse. The horse is uncomfortable, but then, he gets off from the horse. Like a week passes by, then he gets on the horse again. Eventually, he took his time to slowly handle every moment, to journey, as Matsuya Basho says, the journey itself is my home. Feeling as if it's like every moment has a potential for its efficiency. That means you can totally think of you doing something in the world and someone in the world doing it in a better way. And that, you know what that means? That means you can update. That's a blessing, you know? Excuse me, guys. Of course, the apology to the silence is silent. Some things in life we can't control. The man looks at the king and says, after a while, I put the saddle and they trusted me that where I went with one of the horses, they all came. And that's how he came to the throne. And the king is like, stands up, slow hand claps, and he realizes that there is some things they don't have instant solutions to actually revolt against, to rebel against. That means the rebellious urge tends to be an urge towards wanting personal freedom. For example, closer to a socialistic, even maybe communistic kind of paradise of human behavior. Because you see, what is written on paper is much more. It's more precise than what actually happens. What I mean by this in design. Some things it's like Jordan Peterson was saying that it's like the reason Christ spoke about God as the Father, because that was the archetype, that was the symbol, the subjective symbol that was there. It's like that was the alphabet letter for it at the time, the alphabet of the language that was held as real. So the man reveals his long-term strategy to the kings of the land. Because you see, if you want to update, you don't care about how fast the world updates. But if you want the world to update, then you'll care. That means some things you'll be like, of course I got to put aside my own prejudice because the world deserves better. Not because you need to feel better, for example. Psychology is very complex. But if we treat it as the outer realm and the inner realm, and if a person can realize the ultimatum of the mystical angle is the attributeless witness. It's like, imagine a bowling alley, but it's a bowling alley in the bazaar of a third world, let's say, or let me say developing country. Very traditional bazaar marketplace, and there's a bowling alley. Let's say, imagine like a bowling lane in the middle of that market, and that bowling lane, people have come and placed different cloth. Like it's a cloth market, imagine. So you are rolling your bowling ball over all these different colored cloths. And it's as if where the hard problem of consciousness leads us is towards how do we identify the identity when there is awareness which is not form based. So our mind is, I could say, human intelligence is body forged and mind is space forged, and the body is matter forged. That bird, I don't know, that bird is. See, guys, even the birds are roaring. Who said only lions could roar? There was this game called Skyrim. Um, in the game, there was this ability to the character. It was called like a dragon shout or something. The character was like dragonborn or something like that. You know, some fantasy idea like that. And the character had an ability to shout. So he would, through different ways of shouting, unleash different abilities on the planet. And I thought about that. If we treated the mind as the jaws of the lion, what would its roar be? And I feel anybody who asks that question, you will realize why I am urging towards an advanced civilization. Because the future will be made way more advanced than what we even desire. Do you see there? It's like, imagine you desire something, then you see there's something so much more better than what you're desiring. You're like, why the? That's the most instant way you can get rid of your desire. Desire something better than that. That means it was like the person's, you know, it's like, here's the thing. Like, this is something where I think I personally have to implement in my life. But there are certain moments in life where behavior can become habitual, and there is certain, I framed it as loops in the psychology of the human mind. What does that mean? That means on one level, it's like you're keeping a rhythm going. On another level, you're actually redesigning anew every moment of it. You know, what does that mean? That means when you're piloting, it's like it's one plane of existence, but it's one pilot. So right now, I pilot my inner realms by having realized that attention is present before the personality animates. So this way, language doesn't bother me anymore. Like, someone could come and say anything to me, and I'll be like, "Wow, look at how sound is moving today," you know. so so that's the thing. Like, it's really your discretion, and the inner realms is where honor, where justice, where decency, where there's a talk I'm going to give in the future that Mother Teresa kept the kindness resonance alive. That means we don't have to just measure human value in one dimension. Do you, like, I don't know how many people realize right now you can add and subtract dimensions of consideration to your life. You can consider new dimensions, new ways phenomena is simultaneously moving in the sphere of your awareness, or at the same time, you can watch a step beyond the sphere. There's this incredibly, one of the most fascinating metaphysical ideas I've heard, and it's the aftermath of the acceptance of the idea of the soul. So it's for those who feel their souls, and it's the idea that the soul, it must not be inside the physical expression. That means it's like you must conduct this simulation from outside of it, not from inside of it. So in some strange way, when I say go, people should go within. What I'm trying to say is you got to realize how the without is here. Then you'll realize the paradox. It's like you'll open Pandora's box and you'll see the paradox there. You'll be like, no way. That's why those people's eyes like got infused with light, because it was a paradox. It was light's subjective non-existence. Of course, guys, I'm just sharing ideas here. As Aristotle says, it's the sign of an educated mind to entertain an idea without accepting it. So anybody listening to me, I'm just like painting something with sound. I'm also saying we should also ask who's holding the brush of our mind. There was a psychologist, I forget his name, but his work was so honorable that I hope somebody who's listening to this can figure out who this guy is, like a mystery. But there was this psychologist that spoke about memory as being a cube of, imagine a cube of jello, okay? And imagine you boiled ink, like ink you would use to write. Back in the day, you boiled ink and you took a spoon of boiling ink on this cube of jello and you poured a little, that like teaspoon of ink, you poured it on the jello. You would see, because the ink is at a higher temperature, it's as if there is even a hierarchy and class distinction between matter, but it's based on temperature, you know? So if atoms had psychology, temperature would be their survival of the fittest and whatnot in regards to their existential capability, you know. But that's just a tangent. Anyways, what I'm saying is, just a second, guys. I'm changing the music I'm listening to here. Nice. All right. So yeah, guys, just pretty much this idea that you conducted yourself outside of yourself. That means the illusion was being moved by the truth, and only for the illusion there could be a truth. Because if you were truth right now, you wouldn't be looking for truth. Because you're looking for truth, it will make you for eons feel like a simulation. The best thing we can do is cherish the natural experiencer and protect that. That is the ultimate teaching for the species. You have a mind after 4 billion years. Guard it, advance it, and show the world what it could be, because it doesn't know. Nobody knows. As far as I'm concerned, language is hollow. I'm not joking. Language is like ink on a page. Like it's just ink on paper. Your attention looks at it, and in your inner realms, the sentences can have images. So really, if you're a person who you understand what I mean by your inner realms are like an internal cinematic linguistic film. If you suddenly see that words, their purpose is to harbor images or point to the mystery of images. And there is a mystery to every human being's attention. That's the cool factor about life, that there is something that every person has their own eyes. That's the starting ground, the starting point. And your own eyes are simultaneously like a video game. Like right now, I feel like a first person video game character, you know, which is in a physical map, like a multidimensional game, where it's just physical. So we all wake up in the same virtual physical map, and we live and we can do different events in this map. And then when we go to sleep, it's as if the person's logged out of their game, that sort of game. You see what I'm saying? So the value of the inner realms is we realize what language is is its internal cinematic event. That means in front of your eyes, you are made of atoms, and behind your eyes, you're made from a word I have coined, the eventum. You're made of eventums. An eventum is the smallest particular. That means it has design. You can give it shape. I'm just pretty much saying the mind is made of events. The body is made of atoms. And I just created the word eventum for it. I don't know. Maybe one day it catches on. Because I saw that there's also positive events, negative events, and neutral events. I even created the term eventron. And I was like, somebody had to say it. So, anyways, dear listeners, the plane has landed. Your free will is an evolutionary opportunity. Your past is a toolbox. Your future is a canvas. And your attention is the paintbrush. And you will require to go in this life and be humble. That means sit on the ground. I want, sit on the ground. Like if I had an office, I would create a sort of, people would be working by sitting on the ground, not on chairs per se. Like incredibly comfortable, like cushioned flooring. I hope that becomes the evolution of culture, our corporate culture, you know. Because when a person is comfortable, they are willing to release the genius of their inner realms. If the person is uncomfortable, little do people know, genius is shy as fuck. Like, excuse my language, shy AF. That means if you don't trust something, you don't express it. There's been many battles where I was like, okay, in the long term, my trust in this moment makes sense. In the short term, it doesn't. So I'm going to trust the moment, you know? And it's not always linear. Like, I don't know if people feel like machines where they just sit down and thinking for them, it's like processing, like A to B to C to D. It's a sort of calculation, orientation. I don't know. Like, some people may just want to be like a complex machine towards their life. But for me, the complexity of the machine has to come from the simplicity of the inner user. This is why, for me, if they asked me what was life like, I'd be like, it was a silly place. It was just silly. There were a lot of things that made sense and a lot of things that didn't. A lot of things that my attention allowed me to see, and a lot of things my attention didn't allow me to see. So the only thing that Mr. Within can request from a species is that honor the dimensions to yourself that you don't know. That means if you try something and you have this mindset, oh no, I couldn't. It's not for me. I was weak. I failed. That mentality means you haven't understood. There is no such thing as failure. There's only novelty. We cannot compare moments for similar to how we cannot compare. We can't say we have the same body as 10 years ago. This was a thing where I thought of, like, maybe this coronavirus situation calms down. I'm gonna go give a public talk about time travel. I thought that's a good thing. Like, time travel is something everybody can wonder about. For me, the most important technology, though, is not time. It would be prioritized as building sky cities. That means if somebody tells me what's the purpose of AI, I would say to build sky cities, because sky city technology is the more superior technology. Pretty much what I'm saying is, right now our cities are on the earth. They are limited to the conditions of the natural environment. That means if suddenly there's a tsunami, oh shit, we lost everything. But the intelligence, like, think of cities becoming smarter. And how would cities become smarter? Imagine we had cities that had giant, like, imagine like legs like an insect, and the city could just crawl somewhere else where there was a tsunami. Or I'm saying a superior technology is the Sky City technology, which is the intermediary towards cities becoming into spaceships in the future. That's definitely a domain of discussion in architecture that is crucial to be had. I don't know what the hell architects are doing, but you better be looking at the future, you know. And so it's also wondering about the architecture of your inner realms. Because for me, I'm like, what is there to believe? Like, who is even believing the same thing? That means it's like, let's say the belief can be the same. That means you can wake up in 2 days and have the same belief. But here's the next question. Are you the same person? And if you have changed, how could the belief be the same? So beliefs have been mirages in a desert granting justification for violence. And also for goodness. You can't have, let me tell you, the more good something does, it's like the more higher something goes, the more it can suddenly fall. You know? Because there's this thing going on with political correctness, and I'm like, thank God we don't have time machines, even if it was possible. You know why? Because people right now, there's this whole thing I'm seeing with comedians. Of course, morality is questionable, but I'm saying that there's this thing with, I could say, the stars of the Western media, that they are, I would say, like, the certain comedians, they're being judged for what they're saying, for example. I'm just saying that it's like, think about it in this sense. Think about someone comes and says the worst thing imaginable right now. Let's say person A is sitting on a park bench being like, what a lovely day. And person B comes and says the worst thing imaginable. Now, person A could be like, how dare you? Ah, like you just like fight person B. Or person A could be like, ha, that's funny. And the person B might be like, what? I'm telling you the most chaotic thing. How is it funny? I'll be like, because in 1,000 years, there would be so much more extreme ideas that what you have said would be like, well, would be laughable by the future generations. You know what I mean? That means that's the thing. If we want to judge ourselves, there's endless reasons to do so. I could judge myself based on my yesterday, on the day before yesterday, based on 10 years ago, based on even a visualization of what I felt my past was like. It could be anyway. Do you see? So it's like how you direct the plane of existence. Your attention is the most valuable resource. And it's a saying that they would say, if your attention can be controlled, if you think you are in thought, someone could just come and manipulate you. You know why? Because you are not choosing to see more out of the environment. You have kept yourself in the armor of the archaic. I released that armor, and I'm like, it's the dawn of the advanced communicators. What is this? The past is just, at best, it's a tool. For me, like, the meaning of life is not in the past, because the past is past. It's done. The simulation lived its life. The performance was done. The actors played their part, and it's over. Because it was very intense for me, guys. I wondered about this condition that we are all like biological candles, and our minds and consciousness and just our ability to notice the world is like the candle flame. And I was like, what is the point? What is the point of this rare event of human life? The sun has preached the answer before I could comment on the visible. To raise the realm into intelligence. You know, this is my mentality. I just imagine in 50 years, just poetically, I'm just saying, imagine in 30 years, something similar to an alien invasion might happen. And I'm just thinking, imagine we notice an alien invasion happening and we're sitting all, and as human beings, no longer all the wars have ended because it's an emergency. Who knew? A global emergency would stop all the wars. And even all the discrimination. People realized they didn't have time to be, for example, racist, sexist. It was all about keeping the human civilization alive in regards to greater confrontations that are coming. That means it's as if the thing about the unknown is that you don't know what will arise. At the same time, there's advantage and disadvantage. You don't know how the world is going to move, and the advantage of it is that the world, there's a potential. The world also doesn't know how you're going to move. You know, the unknown. Sorry. So in that situation, imagine we realized like some sort of extraterrestrial invasion was going to happen, and we realized these extraterrestrial beings are more advanced in their multidimensional technologies. So we would in that moment be like, okay, what can people do? We would instantly, just like how in wartime, the educational system, like we currently see now going on in the world, the style of it, it was based on, believe it or not, the British Empire. And the British Empire, I had this mentality where it was like it was a time of war, so we need the educational system to provide warriors. And so warriors, there was a sort of Morse code, I believe, at the time. So the soldier had to go in one bunker, memorize exactly everything that was said, completely understand the situation, run to the other bunker, and instantly relay exactly what had happened, or what was said, or all the information. So that's why you kind of see the in the modern educational system this endless thing, like instantly no, and then instantly you're tested on, and then you're stamped with a branded like a cow of knowledge. Okay, I should speak about it like that. You're given a certification of specific ability, but you have to, the value of it is just recognizing that in that moment, if there was an alien invasion or something, the people, I would see that the only tactical strategy that human beings have is we need just advanced communicators going and saying we need to recruit human beings that have advanced relationships with what the mind and what the world will look like. Do you see there would come an urge to see what all our skills in advanced civilization, how it would arise is that in some sense. Do you see? Because we're all energy, we're all candles that are burning. Every day is burning, and we don't have this ethos of an honor to be like, yo, let's become interstellar civilization. Let's advance all the technologies consciously. Because what's terrible? Getting someone a Ferrari who can't drive yet. It's like, do you see what I mean? That's the issue with us becoming more quickly a technological civilization when the user of technology is not up to date. So we would immediately seek to advance the psychological comprehension of what the human position is. We would probably at that point try to isolate our communication. If we felt there was a telepathic invasion, we would have to create bunkers where the opponent, where the advanced, where perhaps the advanced, challenging civilization wouldn't, uh, couldn't perceive. So I mean, honestly, if life becomes a chess game, you got to play it. But but if we can surpass it's like if we create, here's the thing, it's hilarious. We want to increase the potential of success, but we got to first increase the potential of there being the potential to increase for the success. So for me, any system that I see, anything, even if it's let's say an extraterrestrial being, like I was in the market and I saw an extraterrestrial being, and an extraterrestrial being was like, "Hey, how much? Like, do you think this is a good? This item is expensive?" I'll be like, "What?" Like an extraterrestrial, like, you know what I mean? But if the extraterrestrial, I don't know. I'm trying to paint this picture that our eyes has a value not just based on how far we've gone, but also how far we can go. If that how far can become real in your inner realms, then there comes the evocation of the ultimate skill. Then your life is not per se just based on the calculation or the it's like you stop just layering the subjects over objects. That means, for example, when a cup is no longer a cup, that's when you have moved beyond the language threshold, you know. But if a cup is a cup, that means the idea, the letters, the CUP is linked. That means anytime I see this object in my inner realms, I see cup, CUP, imagine. Now imagine you see, anytime you see the word CUP, I imagine see this cup, for example. So that's what I'm saying. The inner realms is like a language we're speaking where we don't realize we are, and that's the greater exploration. Whew. So, anyways, guys, thanks for tuning in. Um, uh, I'm going to put the Discord link here, and anybody who wants to have a serious philosophical discussion on these ideas is welcome to join. So the Q&A is just going to be moved to the Discord. For sometimes the bird that has been on the branch needs to experience the sky again. You know, there are moments where the world speaks, and there's the moments where it never could, and both are honorable continuities.